Excellent. That was a lot of excitement there. So now let's dive into our first analyst presentation. And like I said earlier, we have some amazing insights. I think it's really important at this stage of this market that we understand what is going on in the market, that we share best practices, that we look at use cases, and that we work together to assess and grow together. So our first analyst coming up today from Forrester Research, Vice President Craig Clair.
Here we go. Thank you, Daniel. That was really, really good to hear your humbleness in the face of such great growth and success. So congratulations to all the UiPath team for where they've gotten to. So I'm from Forrester. I'm going to talk about a variety of things. And I want to get right into it because we have a lot of content, and Daniel took up most of the time for the morning here, so I have like 12 minutes. So where's that sake? Where's that sake? So a little bit on today's perspective for RPA as we get into it. Now, digital transformation is sort of today's conversation, but really when you think about it, let's think how we got there. We're a few feet from a couple of ground zeros, unfortunately. 9/11 is the most famous one, but the financial crisis is the other one. Goldman and Lehman, they were right around the corner, right? I mean, thank you for destroying the world's economy, Wall Street. But around that time, it was almost, because of the financial crisis, we didn't realize what was happening in terms of technology innovation. We had Facebook launched, we had the iPhone launched, we had the beginning of mobility. And that really started the shift to the age of the customer, which has been a dialogue Forrester has been pushing for a lot of years, which essentially says that the customer has more power in their smartphone. Social media, interconnectivity, institutions no longer control their brand the way they did. And so everything became mobile. So 2011, 2012, peak of mobility, it was all about apps, right? And so because consumers were transitioning faster digitally than businesses became really worried about keeping up with their customers digitally. And then you had the Ubers of the world that came in with new digital platforms and disrupted. So all of a sudden it became about digital disruption. So the conversation became about digital transformation. But I think we're on a new place right now, which is, it's really the conversation over the next few years is going to be about automation. So that's a pivot we're starting to make. So if you look at this data, so I'm going to sprinkle in some data. We did a research project sponsored by UI that I'm going to sprinkle through some of this presentation. And this is sort of the first thing. What's the good news here is that companies view process automation, which is really RPA in the way we ask the question, as part of the broader digital transformation journey. And only 2/3 or a third we're thinking of it as a point solution. So that's really good. Now, when we ask companies about how important digital transformation is to them, we get a 90 plus. Very, very important. When we ask them the progress they're making, very little progress. Like we're only making 18% of the progress we wanted to make. So in a sense, RPA has become a bit of a easily consumable elixir for this sort of tremendous pressure on digital transformation that really has not been realized by companies. They've been hiring digital transformation officers, giving them no budget, by the way, so they can't do anything. But they've been hiring all these people and not making any progress. So anyway, that's kind of where we are. And then you look at what are your drivers? Now, what's interesting about this data is I always hate data that contradicts my own personal thoughts and opinions. But when I talk to companies, it's really about FTE takeout. It's about costs. It's the first lens they look at. But when you look at this data that comes back, it's really about improving operations, making the operations better, and cost and employee replacement comes out 34%. So it's a little counterintuitive, but look where process errors are, number 2. So there are just a lot of good practical reasons to implement this kind of technology. Now, there's a bit of a controversy about definitions in the RPA space. There is some standards efforts underway, as you probably know, through IEEE and some groups there, the IPA groups. This is Forrester. I've been using this language for over a couple years. That's how long I've been covering RPA. Attended being where the bots are interacting with a human. Unattended is where it's more of a solo bot. It's a batch bot that's actually really kind of takes Harry out, right? I mean, so think of it as, the agent world for attended. You're putting a desktop accelerator there for an agent to do things that used to take them time, cutting and pasting, a swivel chair type applications. So you're getting a productivity boost in the attended world, but in unattended, you're really taking Harry out and moving him into higher value activities, shall we say. Now, the reason I don't like the sort of IPA definitions that talk about RDA and RPA is if they're two different things. Remote desktop automation. So they're trying to separate the agent or the attended world and call that something, and then say RPA is all the unattended. And to me, I think there's some, there are providers out there that maybe only do one versus the other very well. I think there's some pressure to kind of separate them. But the thing that makes separation not a good idea is this notion of hybrid. Because many processes start in the front office, end up in the back office. They can have a bot kicked off at a desktop that might end up firing off a unattended bot that's going to take care of the entire process. So this is our semantics, and we're sticking to it. Now, the way we look at this market, we've done a lot of research at Forrester on the future of jobs, futures of work. That's a personal interest of mine. As you'll hear at the very end comments, I think all this technology is wonderful. I think there's a tremendous value in making humans happier by using their humanness in better ways. I think we've evolved, if you look at our educational system, to be more and more focused and specialized. The Leonardo da Vinci's of the world, the Renaissance people that had this broad view and understood 6 or 7 different disciplines. That doesn't happen today because we get specialized. Many of our jobs have become very narrow and task-focused. And the creativity that we've evolved with biologically as humans is just lost. Think of the way you were, watch an 8-year-old, make formations out of piles of rocks. We have this tremendous creativity we're born with, and it gets wrung out of us like an old dish towel over time, right? So if we can use these bots and this technology to get rid of that narrowness and let people be free, we can create better customer experiences and a happier society. I have a dystopian view too, but I thought I'd start with the utopian one, and we'll end up in a bad place. But the way we look at it is office and administrative and sales and related. These are cubicle jobs, right? And my focus at Forrester is on the cubicle jobs. It's just an easy way to think about them. The majority of cubicle jobs are held by people with high school educations, also called working class. And there are 2 categories, office and administrative and sales and related. Now we believe, based on our forecast, that 5 million, roughly say 4 million of those jobs will be eliminated by robotics over the next 5 years. So that was the basis of how we built the forecast for the RPA market, because the primary technology, not the only technology, the primary technology doing that is RPA. So if you look at it, and it's just another one, this data just is not completely consistent with what I think. So, that's a horrible thing as an analyst. You want to use a lamppost, not the way a drunk does for support. You want to use it for illumination, right? So data should be illuminate rather than be used to support whatever you happen to think. This is a constant conflict of the analyst. But anyway, this sort of says that people are more advanced in implementing RPA than I would have thought. There's clearly a lot planning to implement, but look at that already implemented. I mean, seriously, 49% of firms have implemented digital workers. I don't think that's true. But anyway, this is data, and it's a sample. It's 100. It's an N of 100. But if you look at our forecast, what we have is a market that grows to $2.8 billion, roughly in 5 years. And it's the dark green that's the RPA market. The broader green, the lighter green, is really to replace those cubicle jobs. There's going to be an infusion of AI, other AI building blocks, as we call them. the things that Daniel was talking about, unstructured content analytics or computer vision, whatever you want to call it, machine learning to build knowledge bases to support more advanced decision making. These are all, that's that broader expenditure on the light green. But look at the RPA market. It's 0.6 today, 600 million. That's on a good day. Actually, that's not 600. That's 600 million. 500 million. Just add up the vendor revenues. We have a more formal model of doing that, but it's small. But it's tracking to grow to 2.9 billion. That's an over 50% a year growth rate, and I'm sticking to that. And you talk to UiPath, and their growth is incredible. It's above what I see as the norm. But I interact with all the platforms, and they're all showing really great pipelines and really great growth. So it's definitely a growing market. Now, so who's buying what? The buying patterns. Now this is just there are thousands of use cases for this stuff. I mean, what is a bot? A bot is just something that does something on behalf of somebody else or a business, right? A chatbot is different. A chatbot interacts with humans. So the bots, what are they doing now? The ROI land grab is really just taking things like application testing and licensing and registration and those, and just sort of carving out the FTEs, taking the robots out of the robotic process out of the human. But the area that I think should be prioritized is that bonus territory, and that's where you can envision RPA as a stepping stone to more cognitive applications. So that's what we advise our clients is, when you're prioritizing and when you're selecting processes to robotize, one of the aspects of that is what is its path to more cognitive development. Finance and accounting. It was great to see the partnership that UiPath had with Oracle. I think you'll see something from SAP, relatively soon, because basically the RPA platforms are feasting on these financial and accounting systems right now. There are so many gaps and holes in those processes. One global bank I can't mention, but isn't far from here in terms of its headquarters. They had 1,800 people involved in closing the books quarterly, annually. 1,800 people. They thought they could robotize 50% of them in 3 years. And when we looked at the decisions that were being made by those people, the most complex decision was 50, but the average number of decisions made was only 2.5 on average for the 1,800. So you could very easily see how that could be a great win. This just shows where the biggest FTE takeout we've seen if you take a simplified view of the finance and accounting area. But this is really a great area. So that was a very good partnership with Oracle, and I think you'll do very well with that. And you're going to push SAP to do something, so who knows what they're going to do. This is another use case, and I wanted to bring this up because it combines both the phase 1 RPA, as I'll talk about 3 phases, with a little bit of phase 2. So the phase 1 RPA is highlighted in the second column, and this is in a global banking application where you're onboarding a business. 40% of banking is not retail, it's business banking. It's managing banking business for a business. And in this application, there were 40 different back-end core systems that had to be touched to onboard a new business customer. 40. Yeah, it's just amazing. And RPA was able to come in and build bots to do a lot of that work. But also the Know Your Customer, which was really enacted because of events that happened half a mile from here. That requires you to go out and gather all kinds of information about a company, from the Edgar database, the SEC databases, so bots, intelligence search, data gathering, data pooling bots go out and scrape the websites and bring all that in, right? So it's combining a little bit of the phase 2 RPA, which is unstructured content analytics, combining with RPA, with phase 1. So it's kind of a good use case area. What are companies realizing in terms of benefit here? So this is a synthesis of what I'm hearing. And you'll see on the horizontal, or rather on the vertical axis, we're really talking about the per bot offset. So in other words, a bot will, in the at-scale mode in the block for contact centers, a single bot will displace 2 humans. Yeah, very simple way to look at the benefit. Yeah, so what you'll notice here is that there's a much higher bot displacement for the unattended area for the back office. And that's what we're seeing. But the real point here is that I have the horizontal scale initial targets. So the initial targets that are best for companies are what I call, quote, simple processes. And I define them in a very simple way. There are 3 dimensions of a process for robotizing. There's the number of applications accessed, which I think for simple should be under 4. There's the number of clicks, mouse movements and clicks, data entry steps, and so forth, should be less than 300. And the number of decisions made, 3 or less. And if you take a simple profile like that and combine it with high transaction volume, boom, you're going to be to 3.5 or higher, and that's what we're seeing. So those are the initial targets for RPA right now that are being realized. Now, the contact center and is also at scale. So why is why is the agent world, the attended world, why is that showing less productivity? Well, it's because it's an intelligent augmentation. You're not replacing the agent, you're just giving them some desktop acceleration. In one case for Telstra in the Australia telecommunications company, 40,000 agents, they've got 40 bots on their desktop, but they're buried in applications. They're kicked off. And really they relate to things like they've got 4 versions of Siebel legacy, and an address change has to be made in 4 places. That's one accelerator, so they just pull down a tab and hit boom, and goes off and does it, right? So it's giving a productivity, but not at the rate of, again, moving Harry to higher value spaces. The attended world is really interesting. From a design standpoint, there are more complexity in designing attended. And a lot of the providers, design studios are really geared more towards unattended. And there's a little more nuance. You have to maybe flash up messages to the agent to let them know what you're doing. Even though the bot's acting in the background, you want to give the human some sense of what's going on. Maybe you have some system latency issues that you have to deal with via the kind of applications that are run in the agent center. So, but anyway, you see less FTE displacement in the contact center and more in the back office, but at scale. In other words, I think that what's going on is that these low-hanging fruit applications are being picked off quickly, showing high FT offset, but when you start looking at moving RPA out in the organization more broadly for more complex applications at lower volume, you're going to get more into that 2 range, right? 2.5, 1.5 to 2.5. Okay, so the future perspective is kind of interesting. These are the top use cases in financial services. We surveyed companies and said, where are you investing in for AI? Let's talk about use cases. So the engagement might be using natural language processing, machine learning to understand the activity in multiple channels and correlating the activity so you can tell what a human is doing, what a customer is doing, that they're maybe bouncing a check, or they're frustrated over this or that, and you can figure that out. So that's where the focus is there. The biggest area is virtual assistants, and the biggest area within that is business to enterprise virtual assistants, not B2C, which is surprising, right? Because the whole world's been talking about chatbots. So we have data that shows that there are more chatbots being developed now than mobile apps. Now, a lot of those chatbots came about as a result of Facebook's opening up its messenger platform and allowing a platform for developers, and every brand had to have a chatbot experience, but they're really not very intelligent. They're just sort of giving you brand information. But it started the world talking about, and then we had Alexa in our house. I mean, how dumb is Alexa? I mean, that's terrible. Terrible. It's so frustrating. You can't depend on it to set your alarm in the morning. It's like the most expensive alarm clock in the world. It uses Bing as a search engine. I mean, how dumb is that? I mean, I'm sorry if I offended any Bing people here, but so it's all been about chatbots. But the reality is that we're trying to use machines in a way that they have not evolved sufficiently for, and that is interacting with humans. We as humans have evolved over thousands of years to interact with other, if I saw Daniel in the woods, I had to, and not just because it's Romania and I might have been in, Transylvania or something, I mean, I'd have to determine whether he was a friend or foe, in like seconds. And that, I would be, erased from the evolutionary chain if I couldn't do that. So we have this tremendous talent, human talent for human interaction. And yet we're trying to force machines, before they're ready, to have conversations with people and follow conversation. And it's just, squirrels have been torturing me recently. My wife loves birds. We have 6 bird feeders. We have Olympic caliber squirrels that are leaping off roofs, onto these bird feeders and just destroying them. And, a squirrel has evolved to do things that humans can't do. You think they're inferior creatures? They can go and take a nut and hide it in a hole in a forest and come back 3 years later and find it miles away. We never evolved to do that. So our evolution is very, very powerful, and machines have not evolved sufficiently to interact with humans. So I'm not surprised to see the BDE category, because really, what are you doing there? You're trying to put a superwoman cape on an employee to make the employee smarter than they have any right to be. Because they can turn around at their desk or just go into their chatbot and get some advice. And bots are helping them search through information. Forget about these archaic knowledge management systems that never really worked very well. And providing support. So a financial advisor, which really you can't have bots talk to investor clients anyway yet. That they're not certified Series 7 broker-dealers, You just can't do that. But they can talk to a financial advisor and give them the advice on how to do a retirement rollover for somebody who has beneficiaries in 5 states and give them complicated advice. They can do that, and then RPA can, load the forms, go collect the data, pre-populate it, put it up on the client portal. Great combination. And that's where I think we'll talk about the analytics in a minute. But that B2E space is really where a lot of investment's going on in financial advisors. I think that's a really great spot for RPA to really evolve too. Now, we keep from being robotized at Forrester by creating really complicated charts. When the robot can do this one, hats off, I'll just crawl into a squirrel hole, But these are our 13 building blocks for AI, and this is again to Daniel's point, it's an ecosystem. No one provider has all of these. These are all independent software markets independent science, evolving at different rates. That's why the ones to the left are more nascent, like you see deep learning to the left, and those to the right are more, you see our robotic process automation there. It's not quite as transformative as the upper blue line for companies, because it's mimicking existing human activity mostly, and it's not very intelligent today. But in combination, it's still execution-oriented. It's not deductive-oriented. So the best solutions will be figuring out the right building blocks to put together, apply to a use case, and be productive. There is excitement about deep learning. There is excitement because deep learning can operate directly on a digital image or video and make sense of it. So it eliminates a lot of the data science that's associated with machine learning, where you have to pre-classify a lot of information coming in, right? So it has the potential to deep classify. You have these layers, which is why it's called deep. And each layer can do slightly different correlations based on the digital imagery, and very, very, very powerful. Takes tremendous compute power, which is now available. How many of you think that our great-grandkids will think it's crazy that we were ever allowed to drive? mean, I do. I can see the conversation. Do you believe that 30,000 people a year used to get killed? They let those people drive? Drive while they were texting, while they were looking at, I just can't believe it. It's definitely going to happen, right? And deep learning is what the self-driving cars are based on. They're taking a map of the what's in front of them, and then they're creating boxes around the key elements, and then they're looking at, and eventually they get to a layer and they figure out it's a tree. All of that is so fast. Dell had an interesting argument, recently that the deep learning with self-driving cars couldn't operate unless you essentially built a data center inside the car, because the latency of going to the cloud and back. It was just a brilliant self-serving strategic press release. Everything's going to the cloud. Google, Amazon, they're all making their own stuff now. Dell has borrowed $30 billion to make the biggest tech company in the world. So we're going to have computer centers in everything. We're moving out to the periphery of the Internet of Things, because the cloud's going to be too slow to deal with the real-time nature of a lot of applications. Okay, we get it. Anyway, 73% of firms find digital workers are very valuable. We see significant value in robotics optimization strategies. So this is just, people are getting the message about a digital workforce. That's really good. This I've talked about a little bit, in the sense that machines and humans excel at different forms of intelligence. We should focus the machine on the things it does well: multi-channel context, rapid search and data aggregation. We could never be as smart as the machine in navigation. The worst GPS system is better than my navigational skills, for sure. Could we ever come close to memorizing the content of websites around the world the way that Google search can? There's no chance, right? There are things that the machine just blows us away at. But again, the human elements, it does not. Sentiment, it doesn't, right? The interesting thing about the Go, which was the deep mind from Facebook, was not that it won, but that it picked and Go has been around. It's basically Asian chess. I apologize if that's too simplified a term for it, but to our Japanese friends. But it's been around for thousands and thousands of years, and no expert in Go would ever have predicted some of the moves that the machine made. It picked places to put blocks that required envisioning the progression of the game in a way that a human mind couldn't possibly do. So there is this potential for machines to have great intellectual and deductive power. But you have to be able to understand context, and really it doesn't have the human elements today to do that. So where do you see the most newer term investment? Now this was interesting, because I've been saying that B2E is the way to go and B2C we're overemphasizing. We are. This shows a split. Chatbots directed at the customer directly was 52, and chatbots directed at employees is 48. So that's a reasonable split to me. My point is that if you listen to the industry and you listen to the conversation, it's like 90% is all about chatbots to employees, and very little about creating a better work environment for employees and making them smarter. And that's really, I think, where that's kind of my main point. This is the customer service model of the future. This is what everyone's trying to build. Salesforce, for its Service Cloud, has 80 engineers working on this scenario right here. Very simply, somebody calls in, actually is chatting in to a chatbot, but they get frustrated. They start to pound the desk. They get really mad. They hit a link. The link gets them to a human, right? That's good. This notion of human escalation protocol is becoming very important. When someone gets mad, get them to a human right away. But the human addresses the problem, but the distinction here from the learning process is that the conversation is captured, it's converted to text that the machine can understand, it's brought into the machine. This software category called active learning software is prioritizing that session versus all the others, and based on your rules is going to create a bucket of ones that will be focused on for training the machine. And that will be then prioritized and the machine self-adjusted. So supervised learning. So that means a data science guy sitting there with information, dashboards that will tell him how to adjust the algorithms to make that machine handle that exception, yeah, that difference. And that way, you have this continual improvement of the self-service capability so the chatbots get smarter and smarter and smarter. And this is what's being worked at. This is the customer service, the B2C chatbot world of the future. Now, I won't spend too much time on this because we've talked about it, but again, human augmentation, I think, is employee-focused bots that combine human and machine tasks. That's to me the juiciest area right now. The virtual assistant on the right, chatbots direct to customer, I think is out further, 2021, 22. Digital workers is what we're building today in the RPA world. Now, this is the phase 1, 2, and 3, and phase 1 is what RPA is doing today, and that's what there's tremendous appetite for, as shown by the growth in the industry. It hasn't even started doing phase 2. I mean, I'd say 90% of the world is at phase 1. I try to find use cases that combine unstructured analytics with phase 1 RPA, and it's difficult. I don't find them very often, if at all. I found a few. But that's where it's going. And today it's and I apologize for using the term screen scraping. I know the techniques for understanding the application characteristics have gotten much more sophisticated with OCR and machine learning and all of these computer vision to understand changes to the application and going into the object and the attribute level. I believe that. But the rules are static. You got to code the damn rules in the bot. That's why I say 3, 4 is good. You don't want to be coding 15, 20 rules. There's no rules engine capability. In bots, there was IBM did a partnership with its decision management routine with one of the platform vendors, and their idea was because the rule capability was so bad in RPA that they were going to use their old iLog decision management system to be the rules capability. Well, that's sort of an interim step to me to going to an AI-based machine learning rules so that you don't have to be as structured as you do in explicitly defining rules as you do in those rules engines. But anyway, stage 2 gets into more of the interesting unstructured content, and stage 3 is really, I'll break these down a little bit more, but where you're really using machine learning and AI to drive decisions, to make the decisions more dynamic. So those are kind of the 3 phases, but really they break down into these 5 categories. My next report on RPA is going to have use cases and predictions for all of these. So you see the 5 buckets of where RPA combines with AI to do really cool things. And on the right, you see that there's a digital workforce and a RPA layer to legacy systems. Our numbers show that only 20% of applications have web services APIs. Isn't that a shame? But the good news is RPA doesn't need them. So what RPA really becomes at some level, and some enterprise architects I talk to view it this way, it becomes a layer to the legacy systems, a middleware that gets you to legacy systems without having to do data integration and without having to depend on APIs that may not exist. Take the IoT example here. That's the number 4th one down. IoT sensors with predictive analytics. So, I was with the German railroad a couple weeks ago that's doing a lot with bots, a lot with RPA, and they're putting sensors in everything. They're putting sensors in the garbage cans in trains to know when they're full or not full. It's basically all asset management. So IoT is really important. But their problem is that they had great predictive analytics, they had great IoT sensors, but they hit this wall when somebody had to order a part or to do something logistically related that required a human being to get on a legacy system and do something. So to them, RPA is that breakthrough layer that allows them to do that. So IoT sensors and predictive analytics. Data pooling, a lot more smart search. Do we really need to build systems? I cover an area, business process management and case management. The idea of case management is you have these state transitions and you do data associations with data integration that carefully shows the data elements for each state. And they're dynamic because they're going to change based on a database changing or a core system changing, and you have to figure all that out and you have to structure it. But do you really need to do that if you have intelligent search? with RPA with a little more intelligence. It's going out and just combing through everything you have and pulling it in and giving you the data that you need. Do you really need to upgrade that CRM system for $8 million for Oracle to, when you can just use a data pooling bot to go out and collect the data that you need and bring it to that person that needs it at the time of need? So this data pooling with analytics is going to be a growth area. The biggest area I've seen is unstructured content with text analytics, invoice processing, ripping through a set of loan documents, and doing entity extraction and comparing, marriage, different fields to see if the marriage was right, and trying to protect errors, keep them from the back office, reduce those not in good order back office things, right? That's what I'm seeing most today. Chatbots for internal employees and chatbots with customer self-service, those are use cases being built today that are not in production, in my view. So these are the 5 categories. Now, of course, the data, again, doesn't jive with my sense of what I hear. Unstructured content is the area I see the most, but that came up third with IoT and RPA supporting tasks as number 1. So I find that surprising. Now, maybe I've been biased by talking in financial services context too much and not as much in the physical world. But that's what our data shows. And so that's actually I think, a very interesting chart. So running RPA at scale, and we're going to have an excellent presentation on this after me. But the one thing we did is, I've been taking a lot of calls on RPA. If you ever thought of being an analyst, I can talk you out of it pretty quick. I've had 400 calls on RPA in the last 4 months. These are 30-minute calls where people have thought about a problem for about 6 months, and you get 30 minutes to try to help them. It's just, you got to like to talk to people, I'll tell you. And a little sake does help on some of those calls. But the point I want to make here is this is a emerging maturity model I have for RPA, where level 1 and 2 are just investigation or vendor evaluation. And look at the percentages that are in, of these 400 calls, 51 plus 37% are in 1 or 2, over 80%. So very few are, in level 4, with bots in production, distributed and selected business units. 1% have a concept for a automation center or an operating model, and only 6 have an actually distributed operating model that really works. So basically, we're at an early stage in all of this. This basically says where is the top level of concern? Control and operations management, right? The ease of bot design is actually lower than I would have thought. But what it's showing you is that they're getting the bots built, but now they're proliferating all over the data center like that old Star Trek movie. They just boom, boom, boom. They're coming out all over the place, and we got to get control of them. We got the business that have no coding standards, that have people that they're not professional programmers building these things, and there's chaos. So we have to get control. So that kind of is why this notion of operating model is really important. There are also other areas that are issues, and they're a combination of organizational issues and platform issues. But security there are all kinds of very interesting and new security issues that come up with this stuff. Provisioning credentials for these bots. Bots pretend to be humans. They need credentials. One company, it was amazing. They called me. They said, to give credentials to our bots, we have them registered to the human capital management system. So that was fine, except that one day an executive saw a report that looked like they had hired 100 people, when they were in a hiring freeze. So it created a little bit of, others give them contractor credentials. And when you have this vault of these credentials, which the best practice is to keep them separate, so you can always tell, for auditing purposes, because you need that for compliance, you can always tell what a bot did. The repositories for the credentials need to have role-based access. You don't want the HR guy seeing all the credentials for all the bots in finance and accounting and other things, right? So there are all these little technical things that the platforms need to evolve to really handle. VDI integration issues, Citrix issues, and so forth. Partitioning the control tower so that you can give monitoring capability to a business but not control. It's either all or nothing right now. So there are issues on the technical side, there are issues on the governance side, but this is pretty much the kind of calls I get. Governance basics are being defined as we automate. Connectivity modern, version control apps, rollback capabilities, change management. If you're going to give design to the business, who's going to be responsible for change? Who's going to be responsible for the application being successful? Because you can't split that responsibility between a technology management group and the business. You've got to give it to one or the other. And it's leaning towards the business, as we'll see in a second. So my idea is to keep governance light but federated. So this is my operating model that I put out a couple months ago. And basically, everyone agrees that the business should do design. Yep. But there's more controversy about who does control. In certain large-scale operations, the business does the design and they want the control tower as well. They want to control things. But in many organizations, technology management feels that the business is not a core competency for them to manage and control any operations or any applications, so they're not doing it, right? So they fight about that a little bit. But basically, that's the construct here. The key one is that there is a control framework. If you're going to give design capability to the business, technology management needs to have a 10-point control framework, which I'm not going to go through here because of time. But it needs to look at security, have a security filter, penetration analysis. It needs to look at business continuity. I was with a big oil and gas company, and they had to stop a project targeting 100 FTEs because they had they'd worked for decades to get the right business continuity for the SAP underlying solution. And they were going to put these bots in the middle of the transaction with no business continuity plan. Stopped dead in its tracks, 6 months delay. So business continuity, control framework. What is a good process to robotize? Provide a profile to the business to say, you know what, if this has more than N number of cloud applications that are changing too frequently, if it has more than 9 decisions, if it has more than this and this and this, give them a sense of where they're going to be successful. That's a competency that can be developed internally and shown. So the very simple point here, as I'm getting near end of my time, is RPA is just one capability within a toolbox. The conversation is shifting to automation. So automation we've been doing for a long time. We've been doing it since early days of the Industrial Revolution. Right? So think of manual, going from manual to full automation in some kind of way, recognizing that one of the turning points is the level of decision making that's being done by the machine versus the human. And that's one way to look at the continuum, right? That's on the top. And then just look at the enabling technologies. I mean, you've got core system automation that's been around for decades. You've got the traditional BPM and what we now call digital process automation area with low-code platforms and so forth. I mean, that's core automation. That interacts with RPA. Essentially, bots are picking off humans that will be orchestrated by these larger BPM programs. RPA is not BPM. It's not there for continuous improvement. It's not there to get a handle on the end-to-end process. It is very, very deficient in the things that BPM platforms have evolved to do over decades and decades, right? They're compatible, complementary, not in any way in conflict. Partial is where RPA comes in, and then you move to the higher levels of analytics. So think of your automation center as being more comprehensive, and think of RPA as a building block to move into higher levels of automation. So, I like to leave just on a couple of thoughtful notes. We have human-centric jobs. We have jobs where machines and humans collaborate. We have jobs that are very machine-centric, where a machine will completely automate. If you look at existing jobs, the ones that are the safest are the in-person service jobs, so the green there. Those are jobs that are going to grow. Funeral director is actually, if you want to put a lot of facial jewelry on and get into embalming people, it's actually a very short training program. So, but cubicle jobs, again, my focus is where we're going to be eliminating 9.2 million working class jobs over the next 5 years, right? So there's this transitional area. We have the gig economy, which is also called the contingent workforce. Now, the ratio of the left, existing jobs to the gig economy now is about 60-40. So there's already 40% of the workforce in the gig economy. It's going to flip to 40-60 in the next 3 years. So we're going to have 40% people with regular payroll jobs and 60% of the people that are moving into this contingent workforce. So it's going to be a very, very different world. And then we have the obsolescence queue. I used to want to call this bullshit jobs, but Forrester wouldn't let me. How many are people from the UK here? I know that we have some people, but there was a fascinating poll done in the UK where 30% of workers in the UK felt their job was completely meaningless and useless and could be eliminated tomorrow with no harm. Now that could be just the classic English condescension and cynical way of looking at things. But the point is that government jobs and union jobs, which aren't many anymore in the US anyway, are really holding on to a lot of jobs that really could be automated but are going to hang in there for a while. The real issue is that the robotic jobs, and there's a net gain of new cool jobs, due to all of this automation and AI. I'll just build this out. And you have the highly skilled digital jobs. Now, the average IQ in America today is 96. The average IQ in this room is probably 120. And we do have Gartner and Everest coming up later. That probably lowers that a little bit, but the people getting thrown out of cubicles are not going to wander into the right part of this graph. And they're very happy doing the routine tasks that are the key target for RPA are what they love doing. And they're happy doing it, right? So we've got a big societal problem. Now, I think there's going to be new job categories. They're going to be contingent entrepreneurs, which will grow out of the gig economy. There'll be people that will just ratchet back their material existence. We don't need to have this economy that's based on producing a lot of crap that people don't really need, So we can dial down what we have to consume. And that will relieve the pressure to work as much as we do, right? I thought it was fascinating, the comment from Japan about their workaholic environment, working 60, 70 hours, and how actually bots can relieve some of that. I mean, that's really terrific. Societal minimalists, pink-collar workers. A lot of the blue-collar jobs are getting emasculated because of machines. You've seen the Amazon warehouses, right? You don't need to be a big, heavy guy or work in really dirty locations. So now you've created this diversity for doing traditional blue-collar jobs. It's very, very interesting. So the whole nature of work is changing. My point here is that there's a big change management issue here. When you start bringing and talking about bots in an organization, you're going to have attitude issues. You're going to have employees that aren't going to help you. They're not going to help you robotize their jobs. So we need to be thinking about, how do we make human jobs better by taking these routine things out of their lives? How do we really leverage humans to provide personality? That's the key thing. And in my last story, and then I promise we'll go so we can all go take a break here. How many of you watch the QVC shopping channel, or will not admit to, but do anyway? Well, my wife's from Louisville, Kentucky, and she was always jealous of this classmate of hers who became the second runner-up for Miss Kentucky. And her name's Liz Robertson, and she's the top seller on QVC, right? It doesn't matter what she's selling, zirconian diamonds, scarves, she outsells everybody. And it isn't because she's great looking, which she is, but it's because her personality is fabulous. She engages people, you know, and so we need to use humans to distinguish products and capabilities by our personality, by the personality that the company can project. I had a woman come up to me after I used that little quip after the talk, and she said, you know, I love the shopping channels because there's no commercials. And I said, you know, maybe my IQ estimates are a little bit high, and so that's it for me. I'm going to close it down. Thank you very much.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that Alexa is just a big door or what do you call it on the table, you know, placeholder. Here's the most difficult part of the day. How do we, in this room, have a break in 15 minutes and get back in here and watch the product roadmap? Let's give it a shot. Thanks.
Please welcome the Chief Robotics Officer for UiPath, Boris Kromre.
Coming here, let's see. Okay, mic is working. So why don't you just all come in and settle down a bit? Great. So we're so delighted to have so many people coming and visiting us and hearing about kind of the latest things around robotics. I'm going to talk about our roadmap. So there's a lot of things in there that we have taken from what our customers are telling us, what our partners are telling us. And like Daniel said, we are working very, very close with our customer and partner base, because that's kind of the key thing. A product that doesn't go into the right direction of what our customers or partners are telling us would be the wrong product. So let me talk you through. So when we looked at the product from a kind of holistic end-to-end perspective, the thing that was most important to us to say, what is our end mission or goal here? What we're trying to do is to develop the truly digital workforce, a platform that you can integrate into any kind of enterprise organization, and it can really work hand in hand with humans. In order to achieve this, we need to think about various factors, and we thought, what are the key factors that the technology must enable, and what are the challenges we need to kind of achieve? And we brought it down to kind of 3 major tracks. The first track is the